Tony Bennett as Haimey Kelly. In 1966, Tony Bennett ventured far beyond his usual domain and stepped into a cinematic debacle. That year, the renowned jazz singer made his screen acting debut in The Oscar, a Hollywood melodrama that promised prestige but drew scorn. Starring Stephen Boyd, Elke Sommer, and Milton Berle, it aimed to expose the merciless undercurrents of the Academy Awards. Instead, it evolved into a cautionary example by itself. Bennett portrayed Haimey Kelly, the devoted friend to Boyd's ethically bankrupt protagonist. It was a daring move for someone best known for classics like I Left My Heart in San Francisco. Producers likely believed his fame would carry over to the screen. It did not. Critics lambasted the film for hammy dialogue and awkward direction, and while the entire cast absorbed the blows, Bennett's inexperience was especially noted. Reviews labeled his acting wooden, and many questioned whether his casting was more about fame than ability. Bennett later confessed he was mortified by the role. In interviews, he acknowledged regretting the decision, deeming it a misstep. He avoided further serious film roles, quietly returning to music, where he soared again, starting with jazz maestro Bill Evans in the late 1970s and much later in headline-grabbing duets with Lady Gaga. At the time, rumors circulated that Bennett's involvement was a studio ploy to spark interest in a weak script by capitalizing on his popularity. Others suspect he was urged to accept it by advisors eager to broaden his brand. Regardless, the fallout came swiftly. The Oscar bombed and Bennett distanced himself from that fiasco for the rest of his life. Nowadays, the film endures as a quirky cult choice, frequently listed among cinema's most notorious flops. Although it attempted to lampoon the Oscars as a cutthroat spectacle, its execution missed the mark. For Bennett, it was a humbling detour, reminding everyone that even legends can falter when placed in an unsuitable spotlight. Jane Fonda as Kathleen Barkley. In 1962, Jane Fonda accepted the part of Kathleen Barkley in George Cukor's drama The Chapman Report, a film intended to examine female sexuality but ultimately left its leading actress dissatisfied. Adapted from a novel influenced by the Kinsey reports, the story followed 4 women questioned about their private lives. Fonda, then in the early phase of her career, later admitted in her memoir that she took the role without fully recognizing its ramifications. She recalled feeling uneasy with how the character was written and how the production approached its theme. Although the studio sold it as daring, critics were torn. Some deemed it bold, others dismissed it as exploitative. Over time, Fonda distanced herself from the film, citing it as an instance of poor judgment during her initial years in Hollywood. Talk persisted that she clashed with the filmmaking team over the script's framing, but such rumors remain unconfirmed. What is undisputed is that the project influenced Fonda's subsequent decisions. By the 1970s, she had redefined herself, both as an actress and an outspoken advocate for women's issues, leaving behind the superficial stumbles of her early roles. Marlon Brando as Matt Fletcher. In 1966, Marlon Brando led the Appaloosa as Matt Fletcher, a western that made scant impact on his storied filmography. Although his name had clout, the picture did not. According to biographer Peter Manso, Brando took the part more from financial urgency than artistic passion. After expensive setbacks like One-Eyed Jacks and Mutiny on the Bounty, his Hollywood prestige had waned. Manso and others indicate Brando never truly engaged with the material, purportedly regarding the project as uninspired, just another genre outing with limited depth. He reportedly found the script shallow, far from the complex figures he gravitated toward. Though no high-profile clashes surfaced, whispers circulated that Brando was detached on set and had little tolerance for the film's direction. Reviewers at the time shared that opinion, calling the story unremarkable and the pacing lethargic. Despite a few compliments for its cinematography, the Appaloosa quickly faded from mainstream awareness. Some scholars suggest the endeavor intensified Brando's growing weariness with Hollywood, pushing him further into selective and sometimes unpredictable roles in the subsequent years. Folklore claims he later dismissed the film as just another cowboy movie, a breezy statement that, accurate or not, conveys how little it resonated with him. Audrey Hepburn as Eliza Doolittle. In 1964, Audrey Hepburn assumed the role of Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady, replacing Julie Andrews, the performer who had originated the character on Broadway to great praise. This casting ignited widespread debate in the industry. Warner Brothers apparently prioritized Hepburn's global renown over Andrew's stage expertise, a decision that unsettled theater loyalists and insiders alike. Biographer Barry Paris noted that Hepburn privately admitted her unease, recognizing Andrews had set a high standard. Tensions rose further when Hepburn discovered her singing parts would be dubbed by soprano Marnie Nixon. Although dubbing was typical practice, Hepburn had trained diligently to perform the songs herself. Nixon later recalled Hepburn's visible distress upon learning of the final decision. Despite her professionalism, she felt creatively sidelined. She would later recount that My Fair Lady proved less satisfying than other roles. Some say Hepburn even contemplated stepping away after the dubbing dispute, but the studio stood firm. Though she never outwardly criticized the project, crew members remember her frustration with the entire creative path. Years later, she spoke of My Fair Lady with ambivalence, not because it failed financially, but because it never felt wholly hers. James Coburn as Derek Flint. James Coburn's portrayal of Derek Flint in the 1966 parody Our Man Flint, and its sequel In Like Flint, catapulted him into stardom at the peak of the James Bond craze. On the surface, the role offered everything a rising actor might want: charisma, action, and instant name recognition. Coburn played the ultra-capable super spy with tongue-in-cheek flair, delivering a performance that quickly caught the public's imagination. Yet despite the film's box office success, Coburn soon began to resent the very role that made him famous. Critics largely dismissed the Flint films as shallow Bond knockoffs, and Coburn, who had trained in serious theater and aimed for richer material, reportedly felt he had sold himself short. He later expressed regret for allowing the part to define his image. Regret that only deepened as the industry kept steering him towards similar lightweight fare. In private conversations and later interviews, Coburn made little effort to hide his ambivalence. He feared, and rightly so, that Flint had pigeonholed him as a charming action star, leaving little room for the dramatic challenges he craved. Colleagues recalled his frustration during this period, particularly when weightier roles passed him by. According to several accounts, Coburn had accepted the role of Flint primarily for financial reasons, only to find himself creatively handcuffed by its success. What began as a strategic move turned into a long-running professional dilemma. Casting agents typecast him as the cool, unflappable loner, rarely the haunted or complicated man he knew he could portray. Over time, Coburn grew disillusioned with how the industry and the audience saw him, recognizing that his association with Flint was not a stepping stone but a cage. Even as Derek Flint achieved cult status and influenced parodies like Austin Powers and series like Archer, Coburn's regret over the role never fully faded. The character, once a gleaming symbol of his career's ascent, became an albatross he struggled to shake. It wasn't until 1998, over 3 decades later, that Coburn finally broke free of Flint's shadow with a searing, Oscar-winning performance in Affliction. That role, steeped in pain and gravity, validated what Coburn had long known about his own capabilities. Yet the legacy of Flint lingered, a reminder of how a single flashy performance in the 1960s could derail an actor's deeper ambitions. For Coburn, the regret was never about the fame Flint brought. It was about the opportunities it cost. Shirley MacLaine as Louisa May Foster. In 1964, Shirley MacLaine headlined What a Way to Go as Louisa May Foster, a Technicolor satire featuring Paul Newman, Gene Kelly, and Dean Martin. At a glance, it was a studio dream. Lavish wardrobe by Edith Head, a $4 million budget, and a constellation of Hollywood luminaries. Yet beneath the sparkle, MacLaine later voiced her discontent, describing the film as visually dazzling but emotionally shallow. In interviews, she recalled feeling more like a mannequin than a leading lady, at one point remarking that the experience resembled posing rather than performing. Though she never publicly labeled it a waste of talent, she made it plain the film lacked the depth she desired. Critics concurred. The New York Times characterized it as a glossy parade that fizzled quickly. Rumors abounded that MacLaine accepted the role primarily for the costumes and compensation, though she has only acknowledged enjoying the spectacle. Some commentators think this led her toward more substantial characters afterward, eschewing the hollow gloss of big-ticket fluff. Whether by fate or quiet rebellion, her subsequent work in The Turning Point in terms of endearment marked a profound change, one many link back to lessons gleaned from this opulent misfire. Richard Burton as Mark Antony. When Cleopatra premiered in June of 1963, the spectacle on screen was rivaled, if not overshadowed, by the chaos off camera. Richard Burton's turn as Mark Antony was meant to cement his status as a serious dramatic lead. Instead, it pulled him into one of Hollywood's most infamous media storms. The film's budget soared past $31 million, making it the most expensive production of its time. But it wasn't just the cost that made headlines. Burton, then married to Sybil Williams, began a widely publicized affair with co-star Elizabeth Taylor, who was also married. Their relationship ignited global controversy, even prompting condemnation from the Vatican. Certain accounts allege church officials labeled their behavior as erotic vagrancy, a term that has since become part of the film's mythology, though its origin remains debated. While Cleopatra became the highest-grossing film of 1963, it failed to recoup its massive budget on initial release, leading to financial strain for 20th Century Fox. Burton later expressed frustration with the experience, reportedly feeling that Mark Antony was underwritten and outshone by Taylor's Cleopatra. In his published diaries, he wrote of feeling lost in the media frenzy and disillusioned with the industry's obsession with scandal over substance. One entry hinted at his regret: "I lost the plot." Numerous observers suggest this marked a turning point, where his public persona began to eclipse his craft. Though he continued to land major roles, the legacy of Cleopatra haunted his career. Less a triumph, more a cautionary tale about fame, excess, and losing control of the narrative. Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra. Elizabeth Taylor, the first actor to earn a $1 million contract for a single film, was hospitalized in March of 1961 with a severe bout of pneumonia, forcing a lengthy delay. Her co-star, Richard Burton, joined later, and their affair fueled tabloid headlines across the globe. Taylor later looked back on the role with exasperation, remarking that she felt exploited and emotionally drained. Even though Cleopatra picked up an Oscar for Best Costume Design, critics were divided. Some applauded its grandeur, while others judged it as hollow extravagance. At the time of release, Taylor had one Academy Award for Butterfield 8. Her second for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf would come later. In spite of the film's strong box office returns, it failed to recoup its massive costs and left Taylor struggling with a public identity overshadowed by scandal instead of her skill. In subsequent interviews, she openly lamented the toll Cleopatra exacted on her well-being, privacy, and reputation. Certain observers even theorized that the production's turbulence inaugurated her pivot from serious performer to tabloid fixture, a shift she never fully embraced. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.